Here we are, back again, alive and in your face.
Yeah, alive and in living color.
And
And
as your note says, 100% human. No bots here
no bots, no AI.
that we know. That we know.
We don't even use fancy production systems.
Well, you know, we are doing the best with what we have, much like it did when we were in our glory days of work career. Yeah.
Here's one of my old hats.
Yeah.
I wear that because today's edition is going to talk a lot about stuff that's associated with that.
The good old days.
The good old days.
It'd probably be a really good country song.
There probably is one like that.
You think so?
Yeah. We'd have to ask AI about that.
Well,
And
that'll be an off the record kind of one. Yeah.
So today's news, all the news that's fit to make you gag. Cringe. Let's see here. What should we start with that's border associated?
Well, I think the little email that you sent me a couple of days ago, the anniversary of the need to have a passport to go into the United States. That's when we found out. That's when the penny should have dropped, folks, that we weren't special anymore.
That's right. It was 10 years ago next month that you needed a passport to cross the border to go into the United States. Canadians were not exempt from that rule.
And some would say it's gone downhill ever since. But the reality is that I applaud the Americans for wanting to take back some control of their borders, of their country. Who should be there and who shouldn't? That total mirror opposite of what goes on here. You know, we figure what, 5 million people that shouldn't be here. That one, we have no idea who they are. Two, we have no idea where they are. And three, if we find them, what's the chances of removing them anyway? Because the next thing you know, they're tied up in 15 years of court hearings.
Yeah. Well, you know, the square root of a shrew's fart is basically how many removals we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the soft sell of this is self-evident because you know, the Humboldt case of the guy who killed those hockey players. The courts, this crazy judge has said that we can't, they shouldn't be removed, deported, because that's really what it is, back to his homeland because that will wreck his family life here in Canada. Like I care, you know. I mean, this is so absurd.
Well, you know, I can see both sides of the coin. My issue is that what do we have laws for if we don't continue to enforce them? And I guess that's really what what we have here is a government that puts a bunch of laws up that sound really good on paper, but in reality mean absolutely nothing. We're going to get tough on crime eventually, maybe one day, perhaps tomorrow. But as the old Annie song says, tomorrow never comes, so we'll be okay. We don't have to really do anything. We can posture. We can do all kinds of songs and dances, and the general population will think that we're doing something and will be very happy. And you know, they might even reelect us. Who knows?
Well, the reality is that there's gerrymandering of 2026 style going on right now in Canada with this government. Beyond just fooling around with ridings and stealing, not stealing, but cajoling, extorting, whatever, opposition members to join the Liberal Party. I think they've run the course on that. They're probably running into, they can't find any more scumbags to cross the floor because they found 5 that got them what they wanted. But what they've also done, and we talked about this, and this is part of the reason for the immigration session today is this law that's now gone into practice that allows you to claim Canadian citizenship going back 6 generations, apparently,
or more.
if you want, or more. The report today of the number of Americans who are suddenly discovering they have Canadian roots and want to move to Canada. Well, now, who exactly are those folks who are suddenly so interested in moving to Canada, and what was behind the actual concept of this in the liberal
I think we both know what that was.
Oh, yeah, you know what it is. We need the votes. Okay, yeah. This is a great. Okay, and who are we going to get? We're not going to be afraid of Americans suddenly becoming Canadians who happen to be independents or Republicans. No, you're going to get people who come from so-called blue states, blue cities, okay, Democrats, yeah. Okay, disenfranchised Democrats who are afraid that the Democratic Party might have to shift to the middle a little bit if they want to win re-election or win election in the midterms or even in the next presidential cycle. But for the sharp pencil types in the Liberal Party of Canada, who, as you know, are closely connected to the Democratic Party in the United States, this is like, whoa, how many hundreds of thousands of Americans have the possibility of becoming instant Canadian citizens under this legislation? We've never really been told what the study by the academics or even the census people or whoever you would go back to see what the relationship between parties going back to the Acadians that can become a Canadian citizen simply by saying that my great grandmother was Canadian. And okay, so you go to what do you call that, genealogy program online, and you say, there you go, according to genealogy.com, I'm a Canadian because my great grandmother lived in New Brunswick or what have you.
Well, that's right. And then you just couple that with the fact that you're right, they come here, they can settle tomorrow, pick a province, whatever it is. They have to wait their 6 months for medical, but big deal. But if there's an election, they can vote right away.
Right away.
What is that going to, how much is that going to skew the ridings that are here, where these, these people are not going to go to, hole in the wall Saskatchewan or knee-jerk Alberta or can't find it BC or Quebec. They're not going there.
No,
they're going to end up in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto.
Well, let's be brutally frank. All the blue cities people, all the blue state people that will want to suddenly become instant Canadians are going to go to the urban centers that look like the blue cities of Canada in their eyes. Okay, so somebody from Bellingham, who's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, suddenly discovers he or she's Canadian, is going to be moving to Vancouver. They're not they're not going to go to Alberta. They're going to avoid the so-called conservative regions of Canada. Yeah. But the numbers game is here what we got to understand, and we don't know because this has not been publicly discussed. There's never been a discussion about, wait a second, what is the impact on the political demography in Canada of bringing in literally, I'd say, millions of Americans.
Or anywhere else.
Yeah, but they're not going to, that's going to be a different kind of animal, because if you take a German, for example, who says, well, my ancestor, a lot of those cases are one-way migration concept. The people who are Canadians instantly are likely to be Americans because they left Canada. Their ancestors left because they didn't find the opportunities here, or they intermarried, or what have you. The European version or the Asian version or the African version is not a two-way street. Those people came here and never went back. There's a very big difference.
Yeah.
We don't. Yeah. So this was a calculated thing. You do not have Swedes that are suddenly going to decide, oh, I must, my great grandma lived in Canada, was born there, or no, 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 that didn't happen because that migration is a one-way street.
Yeah.
It's not a two. Nobody left Canada to go to Sweden. Nobody left Canada to go to the Philippines. Nobody left Canada to go to India. These are permanent moves of people. The people who are Canadians who permanently went to the United States are a totally different demographic. So I'm not worried about Africans, suddenly deciding they're Canadians or Germans or Indian. That's not gonna. This could be literally, and I'll throw it out there, and if people don't like it, they can lump it. There could be a million Americans suddenly find out that they have a Canadian passport. They're 99% going to be, in my opinion, disenchanted Democrats, or Americans with Trump derangement syndrome, or basically, malcontents who looking for a free ride, whether it's health care or whatever welfare thing they can't get anymore in the United States, and they're going to be coming to Canada. And one of the reports was there might be a backlash in Canada of all these people showing up. No kidding. Of course there'll be a backlash because this is going to be a number you can't stop.
Yeah. I guess for me, the whole question comes down to a federal court judge who ruled that limiting citizenship was unconstitutional. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Like, why did we have to rewrite the law based on what a federal court judge said? Why didn't we appeal that decision? Why didn't we put a committee together to study the impact of what a wide-ranging, and it fits right back to what you're saying. I think, like in my opinion, I think Trudeau Sr. is rolling in his grave laughing at the situation that we have in Canada right now dealing with constitutional rights. I think he knew exactly what he was doing and all the problems that would come out. And we're starting to see that now. We have a judge who says, well, you're right. Your great grandfather can't pass on his citizenship. Well, okay, so we put this law into effect to stop this because of a war that was going on in the Middle East, where we had to send airplanes, and if we could send trains, planes, and automobiles to pick these people up who had never been in Canada before, but knew how to spell Canadian, were brought here. And I'll bet you, of all those Middle Eastern people that were brought here at that time, probably 99% of them went back when things settled down. It raised the concern that we had. Even then, we had a cheap notion of what it meant to be Canadian. And I think it's getting worse. It's getting watered down to the point of ridiculousness.
Yeah, I know you're referring to the Harper Lebanon, the fiasco.
Yeah.
Where they had literally thousands of quote unquote Canadians who wanted to come home, but they wanted the government to pay for their trip. And a lot of those weren't even Canadian; they were permanent residents. And I always question, why the hell do I have my money being, spent to bring back someone who's a permanent resident, didn't even bother to stay here?
And forgive me for being cynical. I wonder how many of those permanent residents got it because of a refugee claim from the very country where we had to go and pick them up.
I mean, look, the refugee thing in this country has been dysfunctional for decades. When you and I were in the saddle dealing with visas, and whether it was overseas or whether it was in Canada and whatever, how many times did you see someone who had a refugee case going, but they wanted to go back to visit grandma in the very country that he was telling us that he can't go back to because he's persecuted? Well, this happened all the bloody time.
I think classic for me was a flight that we got once a week out of a particular place that was not in North America or Central America. And the guy came back because he had his letter to say that his permanent residence had been granted based on his refugee claim from the country that he was flying back from. I mean,
we saw this all the time, but the dysfunctionality of border management in Canada, border security, the whole visa system, has never been perfect. Let's be honest here, and there is no perfect system, because this is an immigrant receiving country, has been for 100 years or more, and so you have to balance these things off. But we had, at least on the recruitment and selection side, as we used to say, it wasn't too bad. We knew that if we needed carpenters, we would open up the spigot for carpenters. If we knew we needed doctors, we'd open up the spigot for doctors. But we knew we didn't need baristas, so that didn't qualify you to come to Canada, either as a temporary worker or as a permanent resident. So what this bunch has done for the last 10 years is totally made it a joke.
yeah.
And you can see with this instant Canadian citizenship thing, gambit with the Americans, this is evil. Okay,
Oh, it is.
this is all
Right.
about getting votes to keep them in power, because they know full well it's just going to be malcontents in the U.S. who happen to be Democrats who will come to Canada based on this. And they must have done some kind of a study to figure out how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans from the blue states, and basically California, Washington, Illinois, Minnesota, New York, and the urban centers that are complete problematic. I don't want to use any four-letter word to describe the holes that we talk about in Chicago and in New York and LA. But those people will go, yeah, go to Canada, and they're all going to end up in exactly the same sorts of places that they're coming from, except that for the Liberals, these are easy votes, absolutely easy, and I guarantee you, not only easy votes but guaranteed votes, because there's going to be a loyalty.
They never vote.
No, but there's going to be a built-in loyalty. They got to leave, their various brilliant, tax and crime-infested colonies in the U.S. to come to Canada, and they're going to be grateful to this Liberal government for doing this, and they will vote. They'll go through rain and snow and sleet to vote. Okay, and I think that's what the Carney Trudeau gang figured out when they pushed this legislation. And let me tell you, if there's still a Canada around when the next government takes over, this is one of the first things they have to put an end to. Because, okay, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. It gets down to that point that thorn in people's political people's side is the notwithstanding clause. And, it was put in as an appeasement, but it is becoming more and more of a standard wake up. This law is messed up, and we can't have it being messed up anymore. It has to be a notwithstanding case. Now, I know that they have built-in sunsets, and I never understood that nonsense either. I never understood when I was working how I could accidentally land somebody, but I couldn't revoke the landing. But if I accidentally deported somebody, there was no problem.
Well, what's old is new, and what's new is old. What can I tell you? We could do a whole series of shows, you and I, regaling, having war stories of things we saw every day, both at home and abroad, because putting together, we've got 150 years of experience between the two of us. We could people would think we're making this stuff up, but we're not. Why is it that we don't talk so much about these things that are clearly a problem in Canada when it comes to border security, migration management, refugee determination? Because we've seen it all. This really is a dysfunctional system now. It serves nobody except the powers that be, because that's how they stay afloat. Okay. And they demean real citizenship. They demean real community. They demean real a Canadian initiative
Yeah.
by completely diluting it. It's like putting a toxin into the water and saying, "Now drink this," because that's what's happening here.
Well,
And I don't think I'm overstating it.
no, and it also explains too why they figured that it's a six-figure exoduses from Canada. I mean, this is all part and parcel. This country is, the eddies that we're seeing is probably from the lever that was pushed a while back to start the swirl of water to clean the mess out. Except in this case, it's not cleaning it out. It's plugged. It's backing up. It's becoming untenable, unlivable. Uh, we've heard, or at least I've read on the flyby news that the courts have told the people in Alberta that they can't do this and they can't do that with a referendum. I'm thinking, well, where were you when all this was going on in Quebec? When they had not one, but two referendums, and probably very soon we'll have three referendums. Are they going to be held to the same tar brush as this? No, not
Bob,
really.
they're playing with fire with this particular thing. You can't, it's not good for the goose. Got to be good for the gander. This is not, I wouldn't mess with this. Here's some free advice, Mr. Prime Minister. Don't do this because you're going to cause yourself a lot more grief than you're going to solve. Play by the rules that are on the books. Don't mess with that because this is a very hot emotional issue. You're not going to like what happens if you put a stick into the hornet's nest. This is not a good idea.
Well, there's a couple sides of that too, and I mean, I hate Canada bashing, I really do. But
me too.
If you sit back and you think, if Alberta decides to separate and go its own way, well, we'll throw the army at it.
What army?
We now have rumors now that there's infighting in the army because of the sex that's going on. We've got males that won't accept females as peers. I mean,
wait a minute. You're talking about the army that they can't that they recruited who are fighting among themselves. The Sudanese fighting with the Congolese fighting. Oh, come on! This is a joke. I mean, this is so stupid. It's not even worth our time. Let's look at the cracks that are starting to show after a year. Let's be frank, or we could, or surely we can be frank.
Okay, you be Shirley, I'll be Frank.
Okay, so what has this genius banker accomplished?
Well, I think you summed it up a while back in there. The square root of a shrews fart. He's accomplished nothing.
No.
He's not likely to accomplish anything.
No.
He is not a politician. He is a technocrat, maybe a bureaucrat. And nothing has been said with the fact that he got his doctoral papers based on plagiarism. You know what I mean?
Be that as it may, he came out with this ridiculous, utterly ridiculous sovereign wealth fund concept. Everybody knows that is so stupid that it on the face of it, the international community is holding their belly laughing. Canada having a sovereign wealth fund that they borrow money to develop the fund. No. A sovereign wealth fund means you already have the money, or you have lots and lots of investors from all over the place who see real opportunity to make money by putting dough into your sovereign fund. Well, there's no such thing here. This is complete and utter nonsense. And the media, not just the economic and financial media reporters, but plain ordinary CBC types are going, this is nuts. This has no legs. This is a two-legged stool. What are you talking about? Sovereign wealth fund. And the other one about the military divestment or what I can't even remember the gobbledygook word salad nonsense that goes on with creating these projects. Okay. No one is coming here to invest in military equipment. What are you talking about? All right. So it's starting to show that there's a real problem with articulating to the average schmuck on the street what the hell you're trying to do. Nobody gives a rat's behind about some MOU you've signed 21 times around the world with different groups. An MOU is not a treaty. It's not an agreement between two sovereign states on trade and setting tariffs and what have you. It's basically I think I have a good idea. What do you think? Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Let's talk about it. That's an MOU. Okay. It has no weight legally, period. We know that. But they've been conning people with this now for well over a year, and it shows nothing. On top of which, they're running out of Trump derangement syndrome octane. You can see this is happening. And one of the things that was just before we came on the air was a report from CTV that PM doesn't want to use any energy or mineral resource leverage with the United States going forward, the discussions over the trade agreement. Well, what the hell are you going to use for leverage then? Your smile? Your I'm a loss for words. I mean, this is ridiculous. Okay, so now you're saying I'm not going to use any leverage. Well, what? Did someone pick up the phone in Washington, call you up and say, you pull this stunt off and we're going to slam the door shut? Because that's what I think is happening here. I think he's come to the conclusion that, you know what, I can't really spank Trump the way I said I was going to a year ago. It's not working out for me. So I think I'm going to stop poking the bear for a while because this is not working. All right.
Yeah. But we're still going to go and talk to our new best buddies, Communist China, and we're going to go and deal with all the European countries to get airplanes and stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm convinced that Mr. Trump, when he goes to Beijing, is going to say to Mr. Xi next month, or at the end of this month, I believe, here's what we're going to do. And since Mr. Xi knows that he's in deep trouble right now because there's no oil coming to China from his number one oil producer and his number two oil producer, number one being the Gulf states, because the ships aren't moving, and the number two is Venezuela, and there's no ships moving. So, this is where the big dogs decide that, well, we're not going to bite each other on this one. The old Hungarian saying, one big dog don't bite the other big dog. This is what's going to happen. This is an easy bet. And the Chinese will be told by Greer and Lutnick and the guy's name, the Treasury guy, and by Trump himself. Now, that's for those people up north, to that big pink part on the North American map. Here's some things that you better understand. Okay, we don't want those cars. We don't want you meddling. We don't want you sending secret police over to Canada dressed up as RCMP liaison officers, because we're not going to put up with that crap. And Mr. Xi will say, okay, sounds good to me. All right. Oh, and by the way, since you did not honor your commitment to allow soybeans into Canada, even though you got 49,000 cars, apparently, that Mr. Carney said you could export for a year, I think you should forget that deal too. And that'll be that. Okay. As for the European Union one, that is so stupid. That isn't even worth talking about. Okay.
Well, yeah, and that's one of those conundrums in my mind, my alleged mind. I'll fridge that. Why is it that the Elbows Up crowd were so adamant that they could never be the 51st state, but they actually having no issues with being the 28th state in a union that has way
dementia?
Well, it's got way more stringent controls on it. Like, we'd have to rewrite all of our customs laws. We'd have to the immigration laws, and the European Union said, well, you're part of us now, so you have to take another 100,000 refugees. And we would not be able to refuse them. Come on, folks, give your head a shake here.
Bob, I spent a number of, as you know, a lot of time. I was paid to promote in one of my consulting days to have the Central European states join the European Union. I spent years in that neck of the woods being paid by the EU to promote the acquis that the countries of Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Romania could join the European Union. All right. So I'm intimately familiar with what that means. Nobody in Canada, particularly this government, talks about what exactly does it mean to align for membership in the European Union. Apart from the fact that constitutionally, it's very clear that Canada cannot be a member of the European Union because guess what? We're not in Europe. Okay? It's just
Well,
not
but they
possible.
make exceptions. We make
Yeah.
exceptions.
Well, maybe these elbows up people need to spend a little bit of time in figuring out why countries like Morocco, which is pretty close to Europe, couldn't join the European Union. Because you know what? They're in North Africa. They can't join the European Union. End of story. And you know why Turkey has so much trouble joining the European Union? And they've been put off for at least 50 years now of joining the EU or whatever configuration it was before. Because apart from being a predominantly Islamic country or Muslim country, half of Turkey is in Asia. As soon as you cross the Bosphorus, you're in Asia. Okay. That immediately means half the country is not in Europe geographically. Bingo. Okay. So stop with the nonsense about joining the European Union. You can have trade agreements sectorally. And by the way, what they also forget is that those 27 current European Union countries also have bilateral agreements with various other countries, particularly the United States, which don't all necessarily mean that that deal works for, the European Union. As for example, just today, for those with Trump derangement syndrome, the United States has passed a 25% tariff on all automobiles coming from, guess where? Europe. And what cars are we talking about? Well, they predominantly German cars that get exported to the United States. So you're talking about your BMWs and your Volkswagens. Those are not going to be cheap anymore because obviously the Germans decided to protect their automobile industry. So there's no Fords, there's no Chryslers, and there's no Chevys being built in Germany and or being allowed to be sold. Do you see any Chevys on the streets of Paris? Not really. Do you see any Fords on the streets of Athens? Not really. You see lots of Japanese cars and South Korean cars, which are kits that are put together in the EU because they actually don't make them there. They're just basically kits. They're still, they're still Asian cars.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Canada's bravado on this whole EU thing is like I said, we're not even worth talking about. It's so stupid that it's just nuts.
Yeah.
So anyhow, enough of that.
Well, that's true. And I guess just coupled with that, going back to all these blue state, blue city individuals that would love to move to Canada, start looking at what's going on in our parliament, where we now have 5 people across the floor to give them a majority government, not through public will.
No.
And now, of course, they're holding a lot of committees in camera, and they're also bolstering their own strength in these committees. You might not like what's going on in the United States, but we are very, very close here to slipping over the toehold into becoming dare I say it, a communist country here with the way things are going. And whether you get 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 Americans from there, they have a lot of animosity. They've had a lot of indoctrination into democracy good, communism bad.
Yeah, but that Bernie Sanders of the world don't feel that. And it's a Bernie Sanders of the world that might have a link to Canadian citizenship that want to come here.
Yeah.
They look at what next. You'll see guys like Mondami tell you that he's got Canadian citizenship, which of course I'm saying that as a joke, but these are the people that are malcontents within the United States already. Okay.
True. Yeah.
Now, if I was an American, I'd say good riddance. And if particularly if you're not too keen on the folks that follow Newsom or Ocasio-Cortez or Sanders. I mean, we probably know more about some of the American screwballs than Americans do that they're causing trouble in the U.S. Americans know nothing about the screwballs in Canada that are causing trouble. We have to educate them here on our tiny little podcast. But I'm going to tell the folks from Bellingham or Los Angeles or whatever blue town they're coming from, when you get here, if you're not going to be welcome very much, there could be a reason for that. Okay. And it also it's counterproductive in a way, because the same anti-Americanism that this Carney bunch is cranking up almost daily. How are you going to welcome the new Canadians who are really they're still Americans? They're still going to have their U.S. passport. These people are essentially cheap votes. That's all they are. You're not going to embrace them. Full well you're not. Because these people also will say, wait a minute, why do you hate America? I mean, I like come to Canada because of this deal you gave me, but you're making me feel bad. Well, maybe we didn't want you here, because for the last year or so, that's all we've been talking about at the official level, is that the America bad, Canada good. Okay, so this is complicated. But
Yeah.
it's also I think dangerous. It's dangerous politically. It's dangerous at a social level, because if you're going to import even more screwy woke DEI nonsense through the back door here, because that's who's going to use this opportunity to escape whatever thing they don't like at the moment in the U.S. And by the way, how long will they stay here when they discover, oh, wait a minute, I have to pay 52% of every dollar to some tax? I don't want to do that. Well, too bad. So sad.
And that's only going to go up, folks. That's
exactly. And do you think that someone who has a pretty good lifestyle in Los Angeles, happens to be a Democrat, is going to give that up to eke it out in Canada? I don't think so.
You see, this also brings up another point, which again I think was a liberal concoction of you don't actually have to be in the country to vote. If you're a Canadian citizen, you can vote.
Yes, that's actually I forgot about that. So there's another bit of malevolence on the part of the geniuses in the Liberal Party there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So now you're talking about gerrymandering ridings. If you suddenly become a Canadian citizen, don't even step inside the country after they've given you your shiny new coloring book passport, and you're still back in LA, and there's a federal election, what riding do you vote in?
Well, I don't know how that works. They said it was done ostensibly to ensure that the troops overseas could vote. Well, you spent time overseas. I spent time overseas. And I still had a chance to vote.
That's right. And you could pick a riding, actually, of your last residence. That's how you ended up voting.
Yeah. So, I mean,
these person may never live in Canada. Just pick up a Canadian passport, and all of a sudden they can vote.
And then, my disdain, I guess, is coming out on some of this. Like, we had the Donald Sutherlands of the world, whose claim to fame was a connection to Tommy Douglas or somebody. And he was great at telling us how we should run the country and what should happen and what should go on. But I don't recall him ever living up here paying taxes or taking part in any of the social things that went on here. And not just Sutherland. We've got Joni Mitchell just recently. how many people have gone to the United States? The Dan Aykroyds, the poor dead John Candy. I will say Eugene Levy looks like he's come back and done a few things here. So good on him. But I don't know where his taxes are filed either. So.
Well, there's this past week's been interesting. Two things stick out in my mind that impact sort of on the discussion we're having. One was that hockey game in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Between the Boston Bruins and the Sabres.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Where the microphone was failing while they were singing the national anthem of Canada, which is interesting because the two teams were American teams. Generally speaking, you would play the anthem of Canada when a Canadian team's playing in the U.S., but in Buffalo, they play both anthems, even if the teams are American playing Americans, which is kind of interesting. And as you know, the mic failed over and over again, and the crowd is singing "Oh Canada." You can hear them, and so there was no booing. There was no
fisticuffs. There was
nothing. I'm thinking, well, that's interesting because clearly, if you look at the crowd, they know the words to the anthem, even though it's been changed 3 or 4 times. A lot of people in Canada can't tell you what the hell the words are anymore. But they did, and this isn't an American arena with 2 American teams playing. Okay, so there's some hope for civility here when I see something like that happen.
Well, my take on that really is that we used to, as Canadians, laugh at the ugly American. And I'm sorry, but we've actually usurped that role to become the ugly Canadian. You see more and more things on social media where, things are really bad, but it could be worse. I could be Canadian. There's a lot. And I don't know whether the elbows up crowd are really into that or I digress. There's another point you want to.
Well, the second one was the 4 astronauts who were in the White House being feted by the Orange Man. One of them is Canadian. And there was no particular disdain shown to the one astronaut. 25% of that crew was Canadian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to think, okay, what the hell is all this anti-American crap coming from officially out of Ottawa over and over again when there's a fellow who is well and truly accepted as a fellow astronaut from Canada, not an American, in the White House, in the Oval Office, being congratulated by the president.
Yeah.
Okay. No snide remarks, none of that. Okay. So why are we being the ugly Canadian so often, as you pointed out a minute ago? Those are the 2 things I saw this week, which I said kind of gives me hope. And then what we spoke about earlier that took place just today in front of the press, first time Carney's done a serious press conference, where he's backing off on using any leverage, so to speak, with the Americans. Well, I think that maybe I think the message must be getting through that, you're kicking the 800-pound gorilla in the nuts, and he's coming back at you, and you're discovering that not a good idea.
Yeah.
That's where I think maybe the tipping point has been reached. And maybe the honeymoon is over. I mean, we can use a lot of metaphors here to talk about what's happening, but something is in the air, I think. I smell it.
Well, politically is a good thing. But, and it's interesting, going back to this the travel to the United States is down, and it's making a lot of press here in Canada, particularly where I live.
Oh, here too.
I was out for a walk the other day and met a very good friend, older than I am. And we got chit-chatting about what they wanted to do. And they said, I can't afford to travel anymore, whether it's to Britain or to France or to, wherever it is. Because if I want to go outside of the country, not only am I going to be, if I go to the United States in particular, for every $1 that I spend in the United States, that's $1.40 to $1.50 of my own money,
Pretty well.
which is gone.
Yep.
But the other side of that is if I go outside of this country, I have to get medical insurance.
Oh, it's a
And
killer.
in this particular guy's case, he said, if I go outside of the country, it costs me $6,000 a month.
Yep.
So, I don't think that there's an awful lot of anti-Americanism in where we are choosing to spend money or to travel. You have healthcare between the provinces here. That's not an issue. So if I go and visit in Alberta, my medical's still going to be taken care of.
Sure.
If I go to the United States, however, I need to have a special rider on a policy that costs a lot of money. So, to the American listeners out there, don't take all this anti-Americanism as truth. A lot of it is just monetary issues.
Well, the limp loony is the problem. I mean, here we are in the Blue Water frontier, because I live near the border. I can't afford basically just to pop over like we used to.
Yeah.
Simply because it's too expensive. The Canadian dollar is so anemic, and it's just it isn't like it used to be. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And so the issue of whether traffic is down or not, there's things that are happening which nobody actually thought about a year ago. A year ago, we were still building the Gordie Howe Bridge, for example, which is about to open sometime in the coming weeks. In fact, I was invited, believe it or not, to go to a tour of the Gordie Howe Bridge, being an old immigration customs guy. So, but it's a 2-hour drive to our 1.5-hour tour of the thing. I'd like to go, but it's just not going to happen. Long and the short of it is the Ambassador Bridge in the U.S. Is charging a lot of money per axle compared to the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia, Port Huron. And the traffic now, the busiest bridge between Canada and the United States right now is the Blue Water Bridge between Sarnia and Port Huron, because they're much cheaper than what the private owner of the Ambassador Bridge charges. And plus, you have to drive through Detroit to get to it. It's a nightmare crossing through Detroit with a truck, in fact. Now, the Gordie Howe Bridge, of course, links up I-75 to the 401. Basically, it's all highway driving, and it's going to be much cheaper. And the owner of the Ambassador Bridge is, of course, trying to apply pressure, because through political means, to have that bridge slowed down in terms of using tolls and whatever he can politically to scuttle the opening of the bridge. And it's all about politics, and it's all about money. The Ambassador Bridge is an old bridge. It needs some serious repairs. And it's really necessary to have another bridge because of whether Ottawa likes it or not. The north-south trade between Canada and the U.S. still will continue no matter what they can jump up and down and stamp their feet and ban me from drinking bourbon, but it ain't going to stop, the trade between the two countries. It may screw it up for a while, but they won't be around forever anyway. So the amount of traffic now that goes over the Blue Water Bridge it's the busiest bridge crossing in Canada. Okay. Now, nobody thought that a year ago. Why would a truck drive an extra 60 or 70 kilometers up the 69 or interstate just to cross into Canada, or vice versa, going to the US? Well, because if you're paying 50% less for the privilege of crossing the border and not having to go through, the mess of Detroit to get to the highway, they're going to do that. So things change fairly quickly. And again, I see that as a positive sign, because once sanity comes back to this discussion and the adults take over the room, this can be fixed up fairly quickly. It took them 11 years to screw it up, and the last year has been particularly effective in screwing things up. But I think you can probably turn this ship around fairly quickly if there's still a country that's in business next door to the United States. And this to me is of course the other fear I have right now, and we share that. If you keep trying to screw around over this issue of Alberta staying or leaving, if you make them so angry, you're just going to feed into the no vote. We're not staying. That, I don't say it's a no vote to stay. I say it's a no vote for not staying. We don't need this. Okay. And curiously, they built that pipeline, or they've approved that pipeline in the U.S. to double up the capacity of Alberta oil. And same with this is private pipelines. It's going to be doubled in Canada. And what does Ottawa say? Well, we're into making sure that energy is secure in North America. What are you talking about? You just told me those guys are bad guys. And now you're saying it's okay to ship twice as much oil to them.
Yeah.
Make up your mind. What is it? Come
Well,
on.
Tom. They don't have to make up their mind because they're politicians. And as the old saying goes,
lips are moving.
Lie. Yeah. So we'll just come up with something else, and if that one doesn't fly, we'll just find another thing to try.
Yeah. I know. It just. So, and actually, this past week, there's a little bit of good news mixed in with some screwy news. So it's.
Yeah, well, the hockey game was amazing.
Yes.
I think that was just wonderful. Thank you very much to even if there were Canadians in the audience, thank you very much to Buffalo in particular for singing the anthem of both countries, whether there's a foreign team there or not. And, thank you to King Charles for going down and being so diplomatic, because it was actually a treat to see somebody who actually knows how they're supposed to act and what.
That was a good show. I agree with you. I think he, for all the negativity that is swirling around the royal family these days for well-known reasons, I think that trip to the U.S., ostensibly to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence from the UK, it was a very successful one, and it was very clear to me that they're working very hard to try and fix the mess that Starmer's created between Washington and London, particularly over this Iranian thing, but there are other issues as well. But I was as we spoke in pre-production, I guess yesterday, about how warmly the King spoke about the relationship with the U.S., how there was inference about how the Australian, UK, American triumvirate works so well. And what struck me in that whole thing is there was no comment about Canada at all, other than the FIFA World Cup is going to be played in Canada and the U.S. But if I compare King Charles's speech to the House of Commons immediately after Carney was made prime minister, because he was dragged over here literally from his sick bed to make a Commons throne speech,
a meaningless
one. It was the most boring, and nobody can tell you what was said that day by him. He looked frail. He was mumbling and bumbling throughout the whole thing. Compare that with what went on in the White House, what went on in the Congress, his speech to Congress.
Yeah,
it was night and day. And I can see, the United States, which says no kings, no king. That was their king, even though, King Charles has nothing to do constitutionally with the United States, but that was a great show.
Very nice.
Whether you're like the monarchy or not, you have to say it was a great show. It even made Trump look good on some of these things. I'm not sure it was going to help Starmer out very much in the end, but it certainly was a very successful and it was a feel-good kind of presentation done both in the
Yeah.
Congress and in the White House. And what was interesting is that in Congress, both the Democrats and Republicans stood up, I think, 11 times to give the guy a standing ovation. So unity through the King of England. Interesting.
Yeah.
And we can't get that in Canada.
No.
Charles or no Charles.
No.
And he's our king.
Yeah. Well, anyway, from Frank to Shirley, I guess
Yes.
we better wrap this up before we go into another time zone.
Wow. We went on. Well, there you go. So we have our new approach.
Yes.
You know how to do what you need to do about
Liking. Buying us a coffee.
Oh, it's down there.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. And for a change, we actually have some positive things to say.
Yeah. I think that we were going to say, what do we call this episode? I think we can call it the tipping point episode. Maybe it's a tipping point episode.
Yeah.
Let's be positive.
As opposed to Tippy Canoe, we'll call it the Tippy Point.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time to say adios until next week.
Or to keep in Quebec, we'll say adieu.
Exactly.